They were pretty cool. Okay, so when we get to testers, we've got two kinds of testers: emissions testers and transconductance testers. There's actually a third type, which is just heater testers, which basically test for continuity of the heater. But those are like the pocket ones. So emissions testers, what they do is they just check the emissions output. So they put a voltage on the plate, they put ground on the cathode, and they determine how much current flows through. So if the cathode is stripped and it can't supply a lot of electrons, it won't read as well. So the meter, as you can read it, it has replace and good. So you configure all these knobs and switches to match the tube. You plug it in the right socket, you hit the test button, and it tells you replace or good.
But on the left looks like an electroharmonic. If you look at it from a distance, it's just the style.
Yeah. It just said these probably electroharmonics without its heyday. You're right. That color is like the same as the
Right.
Yeah, I never made that knob. Yeah, it's true. ICO is one of these companies like Heathkit. You would buy their things as a kit and you put it together yourself.
Oh, cool.
So this was a kit, and I've got another ICO tube tested with my grandfather that he had put together as a kit. Lafayette, I'm not sure. I think Lafayette is usually that together. So the switches connect the pins, and you got like this is more a later model. We've only got a few things. In these, you see you've got 12 different selectors, and so what you're actually doing is the highest pin count socket is 12, and you're actually connecting each of the pins to to the plate, voltage supply to ground, or to some control voltages. The better testers are transconductance testers. And what, a plate emissions tester, like I said, it puts a voltage and it measures how much current flows. Well, a transconductance tester puts the voltage, grounds the cathode, but then it puts a signal on there and it measures the power. So it measures the audio power. So you have a given amount of audio energy going into the tube, you have some audio energy coming out, it has a rectifier in there, and it rectifies the signal and it measures the audio power of the signal. So when you buy matched tubes, they were tested on a transconductance test. Because you need to match, not the emission, you need to match the gain of the tubes. So that you amplify the negative and positive side of everything the same. So you need something like this. Now, Hickok is like the gold standard, and they have different models. This one is a 600A, which is good for doing a lot of things. It doesn't do everything. It won't do compactrons and laser tube. There are ones out there that do, and they can go from a few $100s up to like close to $1,000 for an older, right? For the best of the best, the ones that really include everything. And when you look at this, so you've got these rotary switches, which again connect each of the elements to something, and this roll tells you how to configure it. So you say, 12AX7, you flip through the roll, the little scroll wheel here, you find 12AX7, you line it up, so it tells you how to configure everything, and it tells you what button to press and test. So that's the Hickok, and that's a good tester. Okay, so after this, we're going to get into real tube amps, but I'm gonna save that for next week. The one thing I will scroll down to is the vibro champ. This is the particular amplifier I brought in. It is a, it was regarded as a practice amp, a beginner's amp, if you will. It was a cheaper amp to start with, and it was low power. And what we can see, and we'll analyze this better next week, is it's got a 5Y3 GT rectifier, so it's tube rectified. It's got a single 6V6 output tube. It's got one 12AX7 that covers gain, right? You've got a preamp tube, you've got some tone control, and you've got a tube post preamp. And then this particular one is a vibro champ. The original champ was, I think, just the volume, and then they had a model of volume tone, and then they came out with volume, treble, and bass. And then the vibro champ gives you treble. So again, like I think I mentioned previously, Fender had a habit of confusing vibrato and tremolo, whether it was intentional or not. So vibro chant has tremolo. And the guitar is not very well to do. That's your basic clean sound, right? You've only got a single volume. So if you want distortion out of the vibro chant, you got to crank it. Right? And what that's doing is, you know, your volume control is very early on. It's right there. So you may be saturating any or all of the tubes in the signal path, you know, when you're distorting. Whereas if you get to higher gain amps, you'll have more tubes in this preamp section, and you may have a master volume there. So you only really distort the preamp tubes, and then you leave the power amp tubes. You shrink the signal before power amp tubes, so you get a lower output, because you may be playing at bedroom levels, you know. So with the volume turned down, now you can still saturate it if you really, you can do what's commonly called slamming the front end. And so if you have a high output pickup like a humbucker, you can still get distortion even though I'm only on 3. I'm providing a really hot signal here, so I'm getting more clipping there, you know, and it sounds different. And then the common thing to do is use a pedal, and there are a number of pedals you can use. You can use the linear power booster from Electro-Harmonics I mentioned. You can use any graphic equalizer. You can use any power booster, or a very common one is a tube screamer. And the tube screamer is nominally a distortion pedal. It has its own distortion. But the way a lot of people use it is they use it as a boost pedal. So it actually gives you a little bit of a mid-range bump, and it gives you more clean gain. But then the first thing you do is you slam it into that first tube, and you get more, you distort that, and you get the gain there. Now, the nice thing about the vibro chant, the thing that I love, is the vibrato. So right now I have the intensity turned down, so there's no vibrato. But I can turn it up. You start to hear that tremolo. And so that's with it at about 5. And it's a nice, it's thick, it's not choppy. It's a sinusoidal vibrato. And then you can, you know, when you really crank it up, it is almost choppy. But you can get some pretty thick tremolo in there. You know, and the speed range is pretty good, so. Not perfectly square wave choppy, but pretty intense. And we'll talk about it a little next week. This one uses what's called bias trem. And if I bring in my trem simulator pedal, you know, there's different ways of doing the tremolo. And some say they impart different tonal characteristics, which I would believe, but I haven't quantified. And the other common one is an opto isolator. I think we talked about opto isolator a little bit. With the MIDI, we're going to see them more as we get into pedals, tremolo, and phase shifter. You know, so. But this, like I said, this is a bias. What it actively does is it has a low frequency oscillator here that affects the bias of this tube. And in fact, it modulates the cathode. So the signal comes in here, the cathode goes up and down.
Yeah, you know how earlier, like beginning of the class, we were talking about how the volume of the guitar would affect some of the tone where the peaks are.
Yeah.
It'd be cool if you could take that kind of vibrato and if you put it like earlier in the circuit or something like that, you get like a tone vibrato too. You know?
Yeah, that's interesting.
That's probably what people are thinking about.
There's a lot of discussion about that. Like I said, that whether it's bias or opto, and yeah, where it sits. And even how the bias is done, you know,